I was relentlessly bullied throughout most of elementary school, so the idea of cyberbullying is worse than a nightmare. Bullies want to make you small and think poorly of yourself. The only place where I could escape that was outside of school. I was so good at it that one of my childhood friends said that she had no idea I was bullied at school because I was her role model for self-confidence. At that same time, I battled it daily. I gained that confidence through theater and other activities, well away from the bullying at school. If I couldn't have escaped, if my bullies could have followed me online, I certainly would have been vulnerable to scams and predators. I was very loved at home and had involved parents. But would I have been immune to falling for a romantic scam? So listen on as I interview licensed social worker Jennifer Lawrence from fightcybercrime.org and help you outthink influencers at Outthink Media. Every day in parenting groups, someone's shocked to find how their child hid a relationship from them or how far an online relationship had progressed. That abuse is often hidden by trust. And grooming often has to happen over a long period of time until they gain the child's trust.
I'm very happy to be here and to share some of the education and knowledge and experience that I have. We've been talking about influencers in past episodes and just how that marketing works differently on developing minds. How does cyberbullying and romance come into play? Just thinking about the internet, right? The internet is kind of this double-edged sword. It's so great because it gives us access to so much information, access to so many different people. But also there's this kind of darker side, right? This side where there's scammers and people who are bad actors who have a lot of malicious intent. So when I think about people and they're engaging in influencers, maybe they're on certain social media sites, dating sites, even gaming sites, just kind of thinking about the bad actors that are out there who really are there to troll, to manipulate, to victimize people. Really thinking about how we engage, who we engage with, and ensuring that safety and education is there in order to keep everybody safe so that people can engage with the people, the podcasts, the communities that they really value and get a lot of community from, but also protecting themselves and their families within that. I would definitely like to come back to that and finding that balance. First, do you have an idea which platforms are the ones that parents should be a little more cautious of, from your opinion? Honestly, and my view of this has shifted over the last, especially couple of years. And my answer now is all of them. We think about certain gaming sites that are geared towards children or young adult, and we know those aren't safe anymore, right? It's not just children who are on those sites as maybe we're led to believe or we want to believe. We see predators, we see scammers on every single site where you're able to interact with another person. And I think that's kind of the scary part for people, right? There's kind of nowhere you go safe as much as we wanted to. So, really ensuring that people have the education around that and to be able to identify some of these signs really early. Thank you. I like to turn talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old on its head and talk to me like I'm over 40, like I am. Right. My worst fear was that somebody read my note out loud in class. And so I think grooming is one way to put an umbrella over it. But what are those signs that parents or educators might not know to look for? Yeah, grooming, I think, is a really good word for it. And maybe I can just talk a little bit about kind of what grooming is too, thinking about grooming as this manipulative process, right? This offender, this bad actor, this scammer really works to build trust and emotional dependency with the victim. So especially if we're thinking about children, teens, and how easy it is for people to do the work online to really exploit, abuse, and control them. It happens online, it happens in person. People out there are predators, they're scammers, they're traffickers. So thinking about how that process typically begins, it's really people identifying a vulnerable target. And I say vulnerable in that, we can all be vulnerable, right? Nobody is immune to this type of predatory behavior. Again, the important thing is for people to be able to have the education and to be able to understand what it looks like. Thinking about how the process looks, they start to slowly build trust, they build rapport, maybe through flattery, through gifts, through shared interests. And that is a lot of times why people are online. We're there to build community. That's why we're engaging with others in this online space. So thinking about how that can make people vulnerable, especially at really difficult times, thinking about teens going through puberty, social isolation, really keeping in mind some of these things that can make us a little bit more vulnerable. So, we know that there is this flattery piece, this trust building, and isolation. That's a really big piece, right? These scammers want to isolate the victim from family and friends, saying nobody will understand the relationship we have. It's true. Using certain language that to us, maybe as adults, reading through this, we can catch this kind of red flag for this alarming behavior. But for a child, a teen, especially if they're lonely, feeling like somebody finally understands them, that goes such a long way. We know that scammers and groomers really normalize inappropriate behavior. They start to introduce those pieces of manipulation. In the online setting, we know that leads to everything from financial scams to sexual exploitation.
Editor's note: Sextortion is when someone online convinces a child to send a photo or otherwise sexualized or inappropriate content, then will turn on the minor and blackmail them, threatening to share it with their family and friends or beyond. Multiple reports recently have resulted in a child that took their own life out of fear of retribution from these photos being distributed. Now back to Jen from fightcybertime.org.
To blackmail, sextortion, and nobody online again is immune to that. For parents, really understanding what these behaviors look like and then putting into practice what privacy, supervision, boundaries, and education that they work with their children on as well.
Thank you. And as much as there are some really good parental controls and ways to help the whole relationship develop, if you were talking to a parent who just found the clues, that moment before possibly it gets into the sextortion and bullying, and how to keep that dialogue open with the kid.
I would say those techniques are essentially the same, right? It's a big piece. If parents find evidence of grooming or some inappropriate behavior or relationship, I think staying calm is really important. Avoiding panic, because our first instinct is for caregivers of children, like we love this child, we want to protect them. Now we see this really dangerous thing that's happening, whether the child understands or not. So I think there is a level of panic that we have, but I think it's really important to approach the situation with care, right? Just like any other difficult situation that parents support a child through. We know that reacting with anger or punishment can cause the kid to shut down, to hide more information. We know there's a lot of fear and shame that are associated with this, both for adults and children. Thinking about starting to have that non-judgmental conversation, expressing concern and support rather than blame. And we know it's never the victim's fault, right? This child didn't enter into this relationship. They didn't start talking to this person thinking that they were going to be victimized in this way. So ensuring that really providing support. And I always tell people, think about open-ended questions. We want to ask the questions, we want the answers too. So, tell me more about this person. What makes you like them? What makes you continue talking to them? And then once you have that dialogue going, parents can start to move into, has this person ever made you uncomfortable? Have they asked you to do things that other people or other adults have never asked you? I think really trying to understand the extent of the situation in a way that feels safe enough for the child to share this information. Thinking back to when I was a kid, I didn't want to tell my parents if I felt like I was going to get in trouble or if they were going to be mad at me or disappointed. So thinking about how we approach this situation with care. I always tell parents, well, it feels like an emergency, and it is in many senses. It's often not so immediate that it's cause for kind of this external panic with this child. You have time, unless you feel like your immediate safety is in danger, then obviously you're reaching out to emergency services, but there's time to take a breath, to take a few minutes to gather yourself, to get a glass of water, and, to find a place where you can have this conversation with your child.
And maybe you're monitoring their social media. Are there signs and behavior changes that might help parents see something that is happening?
Absolutely. As teens and children to grow, we know that there are very age appropriate pieces of them developing their own boundaries and independence that I think at times make us think, do I even know this person who's living in my house with me? But I think there are some signs and behaviors that might give parents a clue or clue them into there's something going on online, whether they're engaged in a romantic relationship, whether there's some scamming or grooming involved. And I tell parents, a lot of parents that I work with say, I didn't see the signs, I didn't know. And oftentimes I find that they didn't quite know what to look because these signs can be really subtle, which can be really challenging if you're not attuned to what your child's doing online. I think sudden secrecy, again, part of this goes with normal child development, but is your child hiding their phone or their laptop or their gaming system? Do they click off the screen as soon as you walk into the room? I think increased online activity is a big piece of this. And I think this is hard. And I talk to parents about this a lot because with a lot of school activities, homework, so many pieces of this are online now. So I always tell parents, think about what looks different. If your child's really rushing through their homework and not doing well in school because they want to get on and play a game with their friend, or they want to go to this certain site to chat with somebody on there. And I would say also emotional dependency with someone they met online. We know that in this day and age, children who are playing games or teens who are playing games online can develop these online friend groups. And I would say probably for the majority of them, they are innocent and people are there to build community and for the right reasons. But if you find that your child, your teen is getting off to only chat with somebody they met online, they stop hanging out with their in-person friends and they're favoring only talking to this person on the internet, I think that's a big sign. Something else about how rumors or scammers build trust with victims is your child all of a sudden getting more mail. We've seen an increase with scammers sending small tokens of affection, we'll call it, a little something through the mail. They're getting a little package. They have some money coming into an account, especially for older teens who might have a bank account. Now they have a new pair of sneakers, they have a new shirt, they want to wear something special when they're going into their room and getting on a chat with somebody they met. When thinking about isolation and how key that is for groomers, is for people, we know that it's fair and normal for children and teens to pull away at a certain point, but ensuring that your family has those communication skills and that you're truly working to talk with your child about what that looks like. Victims become withdrawn, defensive, anxious. So if you're questioning some of their online interactions and all of a sudden you're getting this really heightened response from them, I would say that's definitely a red flag that something is not right with that relationship and definitely deserves to be looked into or asked more about.
I grew up in a really well-loved household. I had my quibbles, but, everything was pretty okay. And I still wouldn't have trusted myself with this access at that age. I think that might contribute to some parents not thinking it could happen because they have a loving relationship. So I wonder if there's anything that might help put the current situation into perspective for a person who doesn't understand.
Yeah. And, again, thinking about the work that I've done with caregivers and parents, and I tell people that, again, thinking about the internet as a double-edged sword and really just knowing that no matter what platform you're on, anytime you're engaging with another person or some sort of chat bot, any app, right? Any gaming app on your phone, any social media, any dating site, there are bad actors, there are malicious people. So I think it's important for people to know and you accept that risk when you use the internet. There are bad people out there. We hope that we develop these healthy children and teens and they'll come to us when they see something that doesn't feel right, but we also need to teach them what doesn't feel right or what isn't right. Similarly, not having 24/7 access to the internet, and there's just so much out there. So I always tell parents it's so important that you have for your family, in terms of monitoring their use, setting boundaries. And I think most importantly with that is having that open dialogue about what is acceptable, what is safe, because we don't know what we don't know, right? Especially as children and teens. So if we're not teaching them what behaviors are wrong or inappropriate, then we can't really expect them to know that. We like to think we have this developed gut feeling, but that feels differently for kids and teens as they're learning kind of social norms, boundaries, what's safe for them, what's unsafe. So I think really taking that into account is so important.
Yeah, it's fascinating to teach somebody how to text message and communicate in that manner. I think my very last question is, what are just some icebreakers, some ways that they can start to maybe open that dialogue?
Absolutely. I always think of basic questions, right? I always think about questions like, tell me what's going on, or why do you like this specific app or this game? What is it about this person that is making you feel good? And again, just trying to get a sense of what's going on, because I think as parents or caregivers of children, we might tend to invent pieces of the story that we think or feel or hope or want. But I think it's so important to be able to listen to kids. I've had parents be very truthful with their child and say, I'm not really sure what to say, or I'm not really sure what to ask you, but I think we need somebody to help us figure this out, right? So that I think for parents, it's knowing where to turn. There's really great information on our website, fightcybercrime.org, where people can go on and get information about all different pieces of cyber scams, romance scams. So sometimes it's saying, again, the biggest message is support and care, right? I care about you enough. I love you enough that I'm going to get us some help to figure this out as well.
Well, thank you so much for your help and expertise. This is really useful. And I know fightcybercrime.org is one place that people can find some great information. I checked out quite a few good links that I'll have in the show notes. Is there anywhere else you'd like people to look for information?
I always tell people, think about what you have in your community. There's victims assistance services in every state through the Office of Victims Assistance, and they often have social workers as case managers who can refer people either to a local therapist or a family counseling center if people need support in that way as well. So definitely some really great local resources.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Nothing about this is foolproof. Lawrence's outlook aligns with mine that open, ongoing, and meaningful dialogue set the stage for healthier relationships, online and off, between families. Still, that can't prevent the dangers, but it can make it easier to intervene. Even in terms of which parental controls to use or not, Lawrence believes that having that open dialogue about what's acceptable or what's safe is really the key. We also need to stay present in as safe a space as possible for our children. Some questions that Jen suggested you could ask include,
tell me what's going on, or why do you like this specific app or this game? What is it about this person that is making you feel good? I'm not really sure what to say, or I'm not really sure what to ask you, but I think we need somebody to help us figure this out. I care about you enough. I love you enough that I'm going to get us some help to figure this out as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Outthink Influencers, produced by Outthink Media. Please see our show notes for links to Jen's resources and share with someone who might need her help. I'm Cindy Marie Jenkins, and we'll see you next time.